Hello everyone, this is Mariam. Today we're talking about 5 essential tips to make your hair drawings way more dynamic, natural, and visually interesting. Let's jump right in. Tip number 1. Shapes. Before worrying about any of the details of the hair, you need to get the shapes right. Hair follows the same design rules as anything else. The most important one of them all is the big, medium, small rule. So for this first hair here, I wanted to do something like braided cornrows, so I decided to first start with separating the shapes that I'm looking for based on the rule big, medium, small, and then I fixed the silhouette a bit to my liking. Then I started blocking in the colors to have a feel of the overall look of this hair. Next I started creating some more detailed shapes inside, showing the skull between the braids. So I'm adding some like randomly spaced lines, but still keeping in mind the same rule to have some structures big and others medium and others small. Then I started rendering my shapes accordingly. When painting the colors of the hair or any other design, don't lose track of the main basic shapes you have put at first, because even though hair has a lot of details, a lot of strands going around, do not lose track of your main shapes or your hair is just gonna look like a mess. Tip number 2. Volume. Any hair should has quite a volume from the skull, so do not draw the hair starting exactly from the borders of the skull. The more distant the hairline is from the skull, the more full and thick this hair will look. So for this lady here, I wanted her to have like a good amount of volume in her bangs and in her overall hair. The way we do the lights in this kind of hair is very essential because the lights would be the most prominent edges of the hair. So the location of the highlight is very important. So using the highlights here in basically the midline of the bangs shows that they are puffing all the way through. If you do the highlights only at the top part of the bangs or the top part of the hair, it shows that this is the only part that's puffing out, but the rest of the hair is just laid down. Tip number 3 is simple versus detail. When drawing the hair, don't feel overwhelmed to draw every little part of the hair and give lights and shadow to every part of the hair. Just focus on some main areas and add the details to these, and the rest of the hair should be quite simple. So start with big strokes from a big brush so that you don't focus so much on detailing every single hair strand, but rather blocking in interesting shapes and showing the lights from the shadows. Making the hair understandable and clear is way more important than having it like extremely realistically rendered. So like you see here, I only added some highlights and some detailed strands in some main parts like the bangs and the showing areas from the sides of the face, but the back areas and the top part of the skull is basically a simple base color without much rendering into it. Tip number 4. Gravity versus hair elasticity. So We know gravity pulls everything downwards, but with hair it can be a little tricky because most hair, specifically the curly and the wavy hair, has some strong elasticity, making it like buff a little outside, so gravity can't pull it downwards as much as expected. So when to decide to have the hair like straight down and when it should be like sticking out. So this depends on how long the hair strand is, because the longer it is, the heavier it gets, and so it will have like more effect from the gravity on it. So we can only see like hair that is sticking out of the head when it is quite a short hair. So we see it usually more in male characters or characters with short hair in general. And we see it more clearly like in the bangs and in areas where the hair is shorter. But like you see here in this character, the more we get down, the more the hair is heavy. So the more it gets down with the gravity. It's important to like not having like random hair strands sticking out upwards or sideways from the head, even with shorter hair. Like it works in some styles, like for example in anime they have a lot of this kind of hair, but if we are having like a more realistic or a semi-realistic approach, we need to follow the gravity a bit more. Tip number 5: avoid repetitive shapes. So hair is a very flowy object, and it should like move and flow naturally. So it's very rare to see any repetitive shapes in nature, like you see the rocks, the trees, plants. You don't see the exact same shapes everywhere. So it is the same with hair, how it flows. We need to have like unrepeated shapes closer together, because any symmetry in any two lines or any two shapes close together would instantly make it like robotic and not natural. So as you can see here in this character, I'm trying to like having the hair pulled backwards to like the hair tie, and I'm trying to have it have some random shapes without repeating any of it. Also for the hair coming of the ponytail, I'm dividing it into mainly two parts. One is a bit smaller than the other to avoid any repetitive shapes. The same goes for the bangs too. So after you're done with your hair, have a final look for it, and if you see any repeated shapes, try to change it a little bit so it's not very obvious. And that's it for today's video. If you want a detailed video about how to paint hair like any of these 5 hairs I created here, I've created a video last week about how to paint hair in detail. So make sure to check it out. I'll leave the link in the description and it will be here on the screen.